In the boardroom today is Guido Berger, a passionate tourism marketer and a Kenyan Tourism Board representative in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. Next is Pierre Faber, a South African very passionate about tourism and founder of Classic Africa, a leading provider of travel services to Southern and East Africa, and Chris Lindenberg, the founder and CEO of Piper and Health Travel, with a wealth of experience in tourism markets across the African continent. And now, over to you, Anne, for discussions around the boardroom today.
Thank you. So many questions we are asking ourselves in the industry about business. In as much as a destination, we've really put protocols in place for us to receive guests. We do not know exactly how the market is reacting to travel, and knowing that we heavily rely on long-haul travel. So from UK, US, and German-speaking countries, they are key markets, whether it comes to tourism or business travel. So I'll first start with you, Chris. Do borders opening translate to leisure business for us?
Yeah, the way I'm viewing our return to mainstream tourism is as a recovery. I think we're in a recovery phase now. It's been, frustrating, obviously, sitting here the last 5-6 months and not being able to get to Africa. And I think as long as we view it as a recovery, rather than at some point things are, magically going to return to normal, then I think we can have a better mindset about the future. As COVID first hit, I think we struggled as an industry initially to shake off the past, accept that this is a new future and we need to adapt accordingly. I think that our recovery is going to be faster than we anticipate. As I sit here, I am more concerned about, is everyone going to be ready? Is everyone going to be resourced enough to receive travelers appropriately? And are we going to have adapted to the new health and safety protocols, as well as other changes to our industry that we have to make purely as a result of COVID? So, if I look at the following 6 months, I think that we still have a small window of opportunity for travel before December 15. My company is focused on trying to get as many people into Africa as we can before the end of this year, so that we can help our partners see through the first quarter of the year, which is undoubtedly going to be a quiet season. My hope and expectation, though, is that by the time the second quarter rolls around, March, April, we should see numbers of tourists that are probably similar to what we saw or would have expected in 2020, because we're going to have a congested 2021 as all the 2020 travelers plus the 21 forward bookings all try and find space in what is actually less beds than were available before.
Very interesting to hear that there'll be a congestion. I think that's very positive and that's encouraging, even bearing in mind that some of us have the perception that until we get the vaccine and it's really readily available in the market, then people will shy away from travel. I don't know, how do you feel about it, Guido?
In the German market, it's similar. We do have 2 restrictions from our government, which is the travel ban, the travel warning, and also the classification for the risk countries of COVID. But at the moment, there is a big tourism online congress, and all the major tour operators who attended and gave keynotes reconfirmed that the travelers are willing to travel. Everybody is very desperate, especially going to Africa. And even many of the tour operator specialists in Germany booked extra insurances for their guests to be able to cover all risks even during an active travel warning. So everybody is really in place to travel. And at the moment we have 2-week windows of the governmental decisions. So it's challenging to plan, but as long as the government allows better traveling, Germans definitely will book new and also travel their already booked trips for end 2020.
coming to you, Pierre, I know you do high end, and there's a lot of Kenya, Tanzania sort of packages. Can I call them circuit itineraries that you have? And the two countries have a very interesting way of handling the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, from where you sit and having to present these itineraries to your clients and to your very valued repeat clients for that matter, are you facing any challenges? Do you have a clear sort of guideline on how you're going to sell the two destinations and handle your clients in the two destinations?
That's a great point. That a lot of Americans like to view East Africa as a region, and they like to sort of combine destinations within East Africa and take advantage of the diversity that the whole region has to offer. And that's a lot more complicated in the current environment because of the transporter testing requirements, etc. We are sort of encouraging our clients at this time to focus more on single country itineraries for the next few months while there's all this uncertainty about moving across borders. And within that context, Kenya is certainly, I think, in the American eye, has done a more proactive job of managing COVID. There's more transparency in terms of reporting, testing, etc. So I think there's possibly a greater level of comfort in the more risk-averse traveler. I will say that I'm perhaps a little more sanguine than my colleagues about the volumes of tourism that we're going to see in the next few months. I think people are still very concerned about long-haul flights. People are very nervous about sitting in an airplane for 15 or more hours next to people that they don't know. And so, again, our clientele tends to be a little older, a little more risk-averse. So, at that end of the market, I'm not seeing a whole lot of interest. It's starting to come in. It's trickling in. It's definitely having the border open is an enormous help. But I would be careful about getting too optimistic before sort of the latter part of 2021. I think the next 9 months or so is going to be tough. But yeah, and it doesn't help the problem that there is now with flights currently. Tanzania blocking Kenyan Airlines flying into Tanzania, and there's silly little self-inflicted problems like that is something we need to try and avoid.
Chris, I know you traveled to Tanzania not long ago. What's been your experience? Are you proactively selling the destination? Are you confident that the measures, that the promotion that they put out about their situation is actually giving you the confidence to sell the destination?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big one for me. It was very hard for me to be, pushing my travelers to head to Africa until I'd actually been there myself. I needed to be on an aircraft. I needed to fly a long haul flight, wear a mask for 20 hours straight. And also, of course, be in country. Tanzania, I think, has been cast in a light of having sort of stuck its head in the ground as far as COVID is concerned. My fear and expectations were probably that we would see inconsistent cognizance of the risks of COVID, as well as perhaps the reaction that we should take towards travelers in terms of health and safety. The truth is that what I found on the ground in Tanzania was exceptional. They'd obviously made great strides over the last 5-6 months in terms of training, and not only in the private lodges, but also at entrances to national parks. We saw, hand washing stations, extra hygiene, requests for masks and social distancing. So it gave me great confidence in Tanzania. The colleague that I was traveling with actually went to Kenya for a few days before that, so I got a download on that as well. If anything, it seems the Kenyans are even more focused on tipping their hat to the risks of COVID and therefore practicing social distancing, hygiene, health and safety. So yes, my trip gave me a lot of confidence that we can sell the destination over the short term, and that everyone had sort of trained and reacted appropriately.
Okay. I know you didn't expect that question, but thank you for answering it so well. Guido, I'll come back to you, and I would want you to probably take us through your presentation. I think some of the slides that you have are very critical to our next conversation. So over to you, if you can be able to share your screen so that we can go through it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, I think as I try to load that presentation, Guido, I think I'll go to the next question where I'll ask, do we have to do more? Do we only have COVID-19 as the only issue we need to worry about as the destination Kenya? Is there more we need to do, or as we are okay, only that with the setback that we have is COVID-19? Probably, Guido, you can handle that as I go and try to put up your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I already mentioned is that we have governmental restrictions to traveling, and as you all know, this has an impact on tour operators and the insurances to bring guests into Eastern Africa. So actually, this is the more limiting factor of traveling or getting the guests into Kenya and Tanzania. But with all the protocols in place, and especially with the WTTC safe travel stamp, which was very well received in the German market, in the industry, regarding COVID, there's actually nothing more you can do. When you need the PCR test, you gave extra hours that you just need 96 hours instead of 72. The protocols are in place in the airport, and so with hygiene and safety, there's actually nothing you can do as a travel destination. But I think we all must be, we need to realize that traveling will change. Mm-hmm. So with the crowded situations we had in beach resorts, for instance, because Germans are so dominant at the coast, most of the trips go to coast and are initiated by volume tour operators. The crowded situations on the beach or in the pool or on the buffet, these times are over. And in Kenya, we always saw throughout the years when we had any kind of crisis, the numbers are dropping quickly, but also recovering. That's good for the German market because we have a high ratio of repeaters. But to be honest, we are selling the same trips since the 80s. So everybody arrives with a charter flight or similar charter flight in Mombasa, and they have their beach stay, they do the Tsavo tour, they maybe go to Amboseli. The returners do a fly into Masai Mara, but the experiences itself is remained the same for almost 40 years now. The experience is still exceptional. That's not the question, but Kenya has so much more to offer. There is a Western Circuit, there's a Rift Valley, there are marathon training camps. There are so many more things we can show to the guests that it would be also time to renew some parts of the itineraries.
Okay. Now your presentation is okay. I think you can share your screen.
Chris, no worries.
Is there something more we can do as a destination? Do you feel there's something we lack? Because you've told us over and over again, and you've come to the destination so many times, you know it so well. Is there more that we need to do?
Just to echo one of Guido's points, the restrictions. 3 of our biggest states in America are excluded from, can't get into Kenya. California, Florida, Texas. Those are big travel states. So that's to the extent that you can lobby government to look again at those types of restrictions. That would certainly be helpful if we could get clients in from those bigger states as well. And again, I would sort of just come back to thinking regionally instead of just Kenya as a country. It's true, I think repeat clients would be interested in, perhaps going to the Highlands, going to Eldoret to see the marathon training camp. So, but for a first-time traveler, thinking of taking advantage of everything that East Africa has to offer, I would say, your competition isn't so much Tanzania. I would broaden it. Think of your competition as Southern Africa or Costa Rica, just sort of nature travel in general. And how does Kenya, as part of East Africa, position itself in the nature travel market and attract more business for everyone, increase the size of the cake?
Okay, Chris, how do you feel about our destination? Is there more we can do to our product to enhance it?
Yeah, I think that there's a real opportunity now, and I think we've actually had this opportunity before, and I think we did try and cash in on it relatively effectively. But as Guido was saying, people's view about travel has now changed. I'm perhaps more optimistic. I think that group travel is going to come back strong. I have a group of 14 in Tanzania as we talk. So I think group travel is not going to fall away. I think that package tours to the coast are not going to fall away. People have short memories, and this will be something that is behind them until the next one comes. I do, though, feel, one of the reasons why we boosted our travel into Kenya just during the Ebola crisis was, during the Ebola crisis, my company and my travelers saw for the first time an opportunity to visit a Kenya in key areas like the Masai Mara and yet not be overcrowded. And I think that an opportunity exists for Kenya now to double down on the efforts that have been made over the last 10, 15, 20 years to identify rather as a more exclusive destination that does not go together with overcrowding, while obviously appreciating that it is a very sought after destination. I think just a little thing, being a little bit more careful about who builds lodges where in the Masai Mara, those types of decisions I think need to be a little bit more investigated, perhaps a little bit more prudent, so that we can achieve a higher earning, but with something that is more sustainable. I think that national parks are probably going to continue to struggle into the future, and therein comes the opportunity for conservancies and private ranches.
Good. Just a question has just come in, and I know we'll take most of the questions at the end of the session. But as you go through your presentation, probably you can handle this question from Abraham Guil. He's asking, is Germany, is Germany quarantining the customers for 2 weeks after holiday to Kenya? So maybe you can handle that and then take us through the presentation.
Yeah, actually, this is an issue which popped up last week. We used to have a PCR test obligatory for returners, but last week it was changed to a 5 days mandatory quarantine at home, and only after the 5th day you will be allowed to do the PCR test, which actually then means travelers from risk countries do need to have a quarantine of at least 7 days, or they book a quick test, which is available just in a couple of hours. Actually, this is, we all know that the German market is a bit different to others. So I try to get some slides and some insights into the German travel market, because we used to be the travel champions in terms of numbers of trips, but only 8.4% of all trips we do from the 70 million trips go on long haul. And out of these 8.4, only 14% go to Africa. And while we are speaking, honestly, like probably in most other destinations as well, most of them go to South Africa with more than 300,000, and Namibia. This has also historical reasons, but Kenya is already number 3 on the African continent. And this is really, really great, because we saw throughout the years many up and downs in Ebola and security and whatever, but the Germans remained very loyal to Kenya and kept on coming. Although we have some 5% ups and downs, the numbers are increasing, and in 2016 we came from 39,000. So you can really see we had a market boost from Germany into Kenya. To account tourists, there are 2 ways in Kenya. So this statistic you can see now is arrivals on the airports. But there's another statistic which I also like very much, because the economic survey accounts bed nights occupancy by country of residence. Of course, naturally, there is a gap, because, for instance, a Kenyan living in Germany booking a hotel in Kenya would be accounted in this in this statistics. But what you can see is that almost 11% of all hotel beds within Kenya are booked from Germans. We have extraordinary many bookings at the coast, which just blew my mind. But we also have a certain amount of game lodges and Nairobi. And when we see, compared to the rivals, the other destinations like UK, US, or Chinese, we see that there is a huge part of business in Nairobi stays, and another shift to safari. And this also means that we have a different structure of two operators, because most of the business is driven by volume two operators in terms of numbers. And there are the TUIs and the day touristics, which dominate, of course, the travel market. And I mentioned the other Congress, the CEO of TUI Group just had a keynote, and with a travel warning in place, which only allows traveling within European country. In July, TUI had 600,000 travelers already within the European Union. So the demand for traveling and the will for traveling is there. And he reconfirmed, when there are ways that tourists can travel without the restrictions from the government, they definitely will. And which is also typical for the German market is the long period of pre-booking. So usually many guests book their trips 12 to 6 months in advance. The younger they get, the more flexible and shorter period, but we are still in the time frame that we have already booked trips from last year. So when the restrictions fall, these group trips or individual trips can take place. And from the destination, everything is in place. But the travel warning is limiting, especially the volume two operators, what I mentioned. The 15th September, which is now the 2 weeks frame, there will be another announcement if the global travel warning will be extended or if it will be more detailed into specific countries and regions. We are all on different levels working heavily towards the government to have a positive influence on these decisions, especially on the classification of risk countries, because the infections of among 100,000 inhabitants and citizens has the same level like in Germany, and there's no reason countries like Spain or Italy are allowed to travel and Kenya or Tanzania is not. And we have many specialists, predominantly most of the safari product from the German market is organized by specialists and smaller companies. They already booked extra insurances. They founded a consortium where they go out to the media and say, okay, we are ready to send our guests with the new health and safety protocols. We have an extra insurance, and even when the travel warning is in place, we will take care. And this is actually also what happened within the European Union. 2 days ago, there was like the Caroni Islands, which were included now in the risk countries, and the two operators said, okay, we cannot work with the up and downs and the yes and no's. So you as a client, you decide if you like to return or if you like to travel or you stay, and we will try to handle it as best as we can. And it's the experience in the country with the protocols in place is all about physical distancing. We are in safari cars, we're outside, so there is probably almost no risk of getting an infection. Many have a feeling of a risk on a flight, but as we learn from different studies, every 3 minutes the complete air inside the aircraft is exchanged and the airflow is from top to bottom and not sideways. So there are a lot of things where we can minimize the risks. But we also see a change in consumer perception or consumer demand, because they want the distancing, they want reconnect with nature, they want to travel a bit more individual, although it's in a group. And Germans also want environmental or social aspects in their itineraries. Digitalization will definitely help us in handling and in informing the guests, but the traveling on the ground will remain very similar. And we see that the Germans are really desperate to travel. It's difficult to estimate because we don't know how the government will react, when numbers will come to a certain level, maybe 2019, maybe 2018. But we will see a shift in the information way. Digital and internet is the first source of information for the travelers. On mid and long term, direct bookings will increase, and we see this from the bigger tour operators in the market, that they're shifting, trying to shift the bookings away from travel agencies to direct channels to them. And same with airlines. And we will also see probably new kinds of consulting situations. So when we still have to live with COVID and we have a physical distancing, why not using the Zoom meetings like we do now for the face-to-face consulting and explaining about the itineraries, etc. Many are doing this already, but it's changing. People are not going into the city to a travel agency, sit down for an hour and then discuss their trip to Kenya or Tanzania. They are well prepared when they approach an agent or an operator. And yeah, we will see a change in the travel behavior. And this is something where also the industry could step in. What I mentioned, there is so much room for new regions, new attractions, new activities. Kenya has more than 50 national parks. So why is the density so high on just the big 5 national parks? Samburu, Meru, in Rift Valley, there are so many amazing regions and parks where you have great experiences with wildlife or landscape. So there is much room to expand the destination and to diversify. And also the coastal experiences, which is so important for the German market, there's also room for improvement in more active itineraries, more active stays, including of community projects and wildlife projects. So we could all use also this point of time to positively look forward and to improve the products we are offering.
Yeah, thanks, Grady, for that. And I think one of the things I've picked, which is very encouraging, is the fact that the lead time for the traveler out of the German destination is 6 months and above. So other than us looking at what's happening in that market now, actually this is a time that we can actively sell Q3 and Q4 next year, which comes right at our high season. Therefore, if you're looking at your market, then we are looking at July, August picking up first. So that's what we should be looking at now, and which works very timely because that's around the same period we are very optimistic that there will be a vaccine. Again, I'm saying very optimistic. We're still looking closely to the studies that are going on and the developments that are going on. But again, Africa, we are more waiting for the Western countries to come with a solution. I'm not sure there's anyone doing a research in Africa about the vaccination. So we hope that even as it's released in other countries, then it will be available for Africa, in Africa, so that by Q3 of next year, then there's ease of travel, long haul or short haul. So thank you so much for that. I can see quite a number of questions are coming in. I'm recording them, so please keep them coming. We will ask them at the end of the session. Chris, how do you feel about, is there any similarity between the German market and the US market in terms of travel and the behavior of the traveler during this period and a year to come?
Yeah, I mean, being from Namibia, of course, I know the German market very well. As you saw in Guido's graph there, they're a pretty serious supporter of Namibia, and that's where I grew up and cut my teeth in tourism. They are, in my opinion, a very resilient market for the most part, current government restrictions notwithstanding. But I do think that they recover strong. I think in any market, you're going to see a very wide response. Over the last 6 months, I've seen every response to COVID under the sun. I've seen, 80-year-olds, being on the first plane out back to Africa, and I've seen, 25-year-olds postponing travel indefinitely or until, a vaccine is brought to the table. I think that markets will achieve critical mass in a response. So you'll have ultimately a general response out of Germany, a general response out of the United States. But I think for smaller companies like ourselves, I think that what I try and focus on is where do the opportunities lie. So if I know that this sector of the market is not going to be comfortable in traveling, then I'm not going to be marketing to them right now. I'm not going to be pushing anyone in that direction, but rather try and find that echelon of travel who is willing to take a bit of a risk, willing to visit Africa in a relative quiet time, and try and get them to travel. So I am more focused, frankly, on the remainder of 2020 and even the first and second quarter of 21. And that's because I'm concerned about what's happening in Africa. We need those dollars desperately. When I was in Tanzania a few weeks ago, it was clear that the value of a tourism dollar has become a lot more valuable than it used to be. And so I think that we need to try and get, even if it's 10% of our normal count, we need to try and get some folks to travel. It gives the guys on the ground a bit of practice, but it also gives them a cash windfall as they try and get through the remainder of this, this travel lockdown.
Winnie from Eldoret is excited that you've mentioned something about sports tourism, because next year there will be the World Athletic Junior Championship, and she'd like to connect with you. So I'll go off-site for that. But by and large, how do you feel about your clientele in terms of travel between now? Are we focusing on quarter 4 of 2020 and quarter 1 of 2021, or do you want us to look at high season 2021?
Well, like Chris, we're very actively trying to find travelers who will travel in 2020. If there's both from the perspective of our partners on the ground and, frankly, even ourselves, we could use some cash flow as well. So it is for a number of reasons. If we're looking for them, we're out looking for travelers, trying to persuade them, convince them, and yeah, a lot of effort's going into that. Realistically, I think probably, second half of 2021 is when things will start bouncing back. I think, right now in America, in addition to COVID, we have a very negative election going on. There's just, America is a kind of an unhappy place right now. And people are not really focused on vacations. I do think by the end of the year, by the first part of next year, we're probably going to see a big increase in interest for travel, but it will be for the second half of 2021 onwards. So yeah, we're putting in all the effort to try and get bookings for the next 9 months, but realistically, don't expect too much. Okay,
all right. There's a question that has come from Masi Wanjala, and I'd like us to address it at this point. She's asking that in as much as the airlines are now up, their schedules are up and they're already traveling, have you felt any incentives or any partnerships as agents coming from airlines? Are they talking to you to better push the product, especially now that we have challenges in travel? Chris?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question. I don't. I'm not very involved with airlines at all. If it's any insight, I think that airlines have again used this opportunity to rather, establish their B2C model and the dynamic pricing model. I don't, personally feel much love from the airlines, but perhaps someone else feels differently.
Okay. Maybe anyone else, the comment, anyone who's been in touch with airlines here?
We also don't book air. We don't have much contact with airlines, but I would say some airlines are being more proactive and getting out there ahead of the others. As far as I can see, and this is not necessarily across the board, but KLM seems to be quite proactive. KLM Delta in terms of trying to get routes reestablished. Qatar and Emirates, I'd say also. So there is within the airline industry, there are some airlines that are being more proactive and pushing harder. There are others that are sort of in a more defensive mode.
Okay. Dr. John Wakanda asked, thanks Guido for the informative presentation. Now that Kenya was awarded safe travel status by World Travel and Tourism Council, do you foresee endorsement by the German and EU? Tough question there.
I hope that on the European level, this will also be appreciated. I know that the Kenyan government and the tourism bodies are in close contact with the German embassy in Nairobi. And the afternoon where Kenya received the WTTC stamp, they already had meetings with the ambassador to give all the information necessary to the German governmental bodies like the Federal Foreign Office and the Robert Koch Institute, which is our health control center. So I really hope that all the information and the protocols came to the right decision makers in the government, but we are also following up from different sides, from tour operator side, from the tourism bodies in Germany, and also through personal contacts, because as a company or as a citizen, you really don't know how the decision is made for a country being on the risk list or not. So there are so many factors which are health, which are political, which are economic, that we really don't know. But we are all pushing hard, and the European Union is probably more an issue for Kenyans or East Africans who are willing to travel to Europe, to see that they're not coming from a risk country, but yeah, from what I hear, we have a positive feedback. And also, coming back to the airline question, all airlines started increasing their flight planes from Europe to Eastern Africa in September. So even Lufthansa, which just flew 3 times a week in August, updated their flight plan, now are back on 5. KLM increased their schedules, and even Condor, which is important for Mombasa, they will return in December because they are still working with the pre-bookings. But there is definitely action in the market.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Guido. Annabella, I've allowed you to talk because I can see you have a good comment on opening other markets, like South American markets. Can you hear me? Are you able to talk?
Hello there, everybody.
Hi, Annabella. Hi. Introduce yourself, maybe, for those who don't know you.
I'm Annabella from Manyago Safaris in Kenya. The South American market, the Latin market in general, is a market that decides very, very quickly where they're going to go on holiday. For example, I have several Mexican groups coming in October. They asked for Kenya. I cannot give them Kenya because they are not exempt. So I've had to take them to Tanzania, which is a great loss for Kenya. Now, the Mexican market Mexico is not any worse off than America or some of the European countries we're targeting. So why they're not exempt, I cannot understand. And that goes for several of the South American countries. So this is something that needs to be considered and opened up, or else, we're losing out as a country. I'm not losing as a business, but it's sad that they ask for Kenya, and I have to say, sorry, you can't come to Kenya, but I can take you to Tanzania.
Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Sad to hear that we are losing business when we need it most. But Annabella, very good point, because then that's something we can raise with the authorities to really keep reviewing. And I know they've been informed by they have good reasons as to why they've locked out some of the countries into travel into Kenya. But again, these are some of the comments or some of the information we need to pass on to the authorities so that then they can make a more informed decision, or they can know the impact that decision has to the industry. Thank you so much for that. Pierre, thank you. Pierre, there's a question that came in that I'd like you to handle.
Have you muted me? Sorry.
Yes, Annabella, let me get you off.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So Pierre, the question was about the older generation travelers compared to the younger, bearing in mind that the older have more resources and time to explore the destination. So Peter was asking about the participation trend. And I'll add on to that question because over the past, say, 5 years or so, 6 years, maybe even more, we've seen a lot of multi-generational travel, where it's grandfather, father, mother, and children. So, and sometimes you find that the grandparent is the one who has actually financed the trip because he's taking his family on holiday. Two things, could the COVID-19 pandemic then turn that around? Will we see a more reduced travel by the older generation, yet they are the ones who have ability to spend? Or how do we know exactly how that is turning around? Can you see anything that can shape an answer to that?
Yeah, no, it's very, very good question, and it's very true. The older travelers are more reluctant to travel at this point, particularly with the long haul destinations, long haul flights, and that multi-generational. Again, you're exactly right. It's normally the grandparents who are financing that. What we are seeing, I do think there's going to be a lot of pent up demand once this is over. And yesterday I was working on a booking for the Christmas 2021 timeframe. And I was amazed at how little availability there is. So I think starting in the latter part of 2021, that's going to bounce back in a big way. But in the near term, don't expect the older travelers. We've got to try and target the young professionals, younger travelers who are less risk averse.
And that, of course, calls for us to be very deliberate in the way we are pricing them. Because if we are saying that the older generation is one that used to fund the safari mainly, and now we are looking at the younger ones, probably could we look at repackaging then? Do we look at pricing? Of course, pricing because we want to attract the traveler back, but could this be a reason for us to look at pricing as well?
Yeah, but be careful. That's a touchy one because you can hurt the brand. Particularly at the higher end of the market, it's very difficult to recover from deep discounting. So what we're encouraging our partners to do is, work with the tour operator, work with the agent, take it on a case-by-case basis. Some clients need more incentivizing than others. I do think that anyone who's willing to travel in the next 6 months is expecting some kind of reward for taking the risk of traveling at this point. But be careful about throwing around too many discounts. There are people who are going to be trying to exploit it as well. And I know understandably a lot of properties are turning to the resident market and their resident rates, and that's understandable. But be careful of those being exploited. We've had cases where people who could very well afford to pay the full rates have masqueraded as locals, or come in via a local friend and kind of exploited those resident rates. So be careful with the discounting.
Oh, great! I think that's very encouraging to hear that discounting might not necessarily be the solution to the situation we are in right now. Thank you so much for that, Pierre, because the first thing we think of when there's no business is giving deals, and probably it could hurt us in that. Thank you so much. Now, Chris, I'd like you to handle this, more of a comment that has come from Tony Muiruri, and he's thinking of the pandemic seems to be fading away, mostly because the pandemic seems like it's going to fade away slowly with a lot of after effects, which could be more psychological. For instance, this being a long-haul destination and Kenya being a third world country. Do you feel that psychological effect could actually slow down our recovery?
Yes, I think that's a potential, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily going to be the case. I think if we look at the global situation, I would say that in many respects, Africa has distinguished itself during this time. There are a lot of indicators that African countries, especially those that are familiar with viral outbreaks like Ebola, were better prepared, reacted faster, even how they manage their resources. Kenya and Rwanda both have an exceptional reputation now here in the United States for how they reacted, for being forward-thinking, and for adapting existing infrastructure. You can't shake. It's very hard for us sitting in Europe and the United States to shake the drive of specific media to always want to paint Africa in a negative light. I'm just going to say it: the New York Times and the BBC, they are like jackals to the kill when there's a bad news Africa story. They love it. But I think that collectively within tourism organizations and even the private sector, we've been trying to steer the narrative into a more positive light. And I think that the last 6 months, if we look at statistics, we look at reactions, we look at how infrastructure has been used specifically in Kenya and Rwanda, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, very low numbers. I think that there's a lot of positivity to be gained, and if anything, again, there's an opportunity for a confidence boost to a traveler wanting to visit a Namibia, a Botswana that has very, very low, population numbers, or even a Rwanda, the most densely populated country in Africa, that has done an exceptional job of managing COVID.
As we wind down, I'll request each of the panelists to say one final parting shot.
I think as a result of my recent travels, perhaps I'm feeling more optimistic than a lot. And that's why I think it's important. I think travel advisors, travel professionals need to get to Africa. They are going to be a major part of the recovery story. Getting travel professionals there and then getting them back and sharing that Africa is, open for business and that everything's going well. I think I will echo what others have said here today, and I think it's critically important that we continue to petition the Kenyan government to reconsider its position on California, Texas, and Florida as far as the United States is concerned. We spoke about South American countries and even European countries that are still on the watch list. I think approaching that rather on a infection per capita than a pure infection number is going to be key. California, for example, doesn't have a very high per capita infection rate, but we are, of course, a very populous area, which is going to give us a lot of infection. So I think that the tourism industry petitioning the government to carefully consider that and consider the financial impact of these major destinations not being allowed in. I'll just add one last thing in that regard, though. As Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda are open for business, they are, of course, catching a lot of that Southern African business that would be heading that way if they were open. So it's always a bit of give and take.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both for that. Guido?
We have a very active German market, but we have at the moment restrictions from the government, which actually nullified travel desires outside the European Union. But what we could see during the public holidays now is that people are willing to travel. There were good numbers within the European Union during the public holidays. And when it will be possible to travel to East African countries, they will definitely travel. And some of them have already booked trips for end of 2020 because they booked it 6 or 8 months in advance. So there should be a good reason to travel to Eastern Africa. But of course, the security perception might be a challenging one, but not in terms of being Kenya kind of third world country, because everybody needs to acclimatize with the new situation and the hygiene protocols we also have in place here. But as Chris mentioned, you cannot work against the big media houses. That's a fight you cannot win. But we still can inform everybody on how good the protocols are in place, how good they are controlled. And what I learned from all the research I did is the protocols in Kenya, for instance, or in Tanzania are much more stricter than here in Germany. So this is definitely a positive side, and really gives confidence in traveling.
Interesting. Thank you so much for that. Interesting to hear that we actually have more stricter COVID-19 protocol procedures than Germany. That's interesting. At least we have that right. I'm proud of our country. Only that we need to make sure that the residents are safe, the guests are safe, and we create a good, conducive environment for everyone, even as we find the solutions to the COVID-19 pandemic. Pierre?
Okay, yep, Pierre Faber, co-owner of Classic Africa, Africa specialist since 1999. And I also would like to end on a positive note. I do think Kenya and Rwanda in particular have distinguished themselves, even in a global context, in the way that they managed COVID and been able to reopen to international tourism relatively quickly and thus far very safely. So I think that you've really done yourselves a big favor in the way that you've handled this process. I would encourage you to hang in there. I think, as I said, the next 9 months are going to be tough. You know, we just got to stay afloat, keep things going. And I do think there's going to be a rebound. There's pent-up demand, and I do think there'll be a fairly quick rebound in the second part of 2021, certainly going into 2022. A couple of things that may be sort of within the control of the destinations. That again, get people coming from countries, and you know, here in the States, California, Florida, Texas, 3 of our biggest, most travel-rich states. Let them come. If it's safe for people to come from South America, encourage your government to let people come in. And then avoid self-inflicted wounds. Magori airstrip is scheduled to be closed through the whole of peak season next year. Try and move that process along. Try and get Magori open again. These flights between Kenya and Tanzania, try and get that operation again. We have enough challenges from COVID and global issues. Don't make it harder with things that are sort of within your control.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. Again, very good insights, a very informative conversation we've had this afternoon, morning for Chris and Pierre. Thank you so much for waking up this early to be with us, Chris. We can see now it's getting lighter. Your background is getting brighter. It's daylight is almost here. So thank you to the participants who've been here this afternoon. We really appreciate that you've been very active. You've been very interactive through the session. And definitely these are some of the conversations we need to have every so often so that it shapes our decision making, especially when it comes to the marketing strategies we are putting in place, what expectations we have from the market. And actually, it's not all dark out there. It's not as bad as we think it is. We can actually be looking at business for Q4 already and Q1 of next year. So thank you so much. I'll end the session now. I'll share the profiles for our panelists as well as their contacts with you on email. Please keep in touch. And should you have any questions, forward them to info@thehospitalityconsult.com, and we will forward them to the panelists you'd like to hear from. Have a good afternoon.